Good evening and welcome to our Stations of the Cross, the biblical way of Jesus. The way of the cross has been an integral part of the devotional life of Catholics for centuries. The roots of the devotion can be found in the early Christian practice of retracing the path that Jesus walked from the genesis of his passion in the Garden of Gethsemane on the Mount of Olives, through the Kidron Valley, along the streets of Jerusalem, and finally to the summit of Calvary. The ancient path of pilgrimage was more inclusive of the entire Passion of Christ than later versions. Rather than beginning in the Garden of Gethsemane, later versions included the arrangement found in most Catholic churches today, began with the condemnation of Jesus, and include a number of stations that are based more on tradition than on the Scriptures. In 1991, John Paul II introduced a new version of the Way of the Cross that follows the more ancient practice. Pope Benedict has continued it. This new scriptural version is presented here. I invite you now to center yourself and be still and enter into the Passion of the Christ. And let us begin. The first station, Jesus prays in the garden. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of Luke. Then he withdrew from them, about a stone's throw, knelt down and prayed, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet, not my will, but yours be done. Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. In his anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. When he got up from prayer, he came to his disciples and found them sleeping because of grief. And he said to them, Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray that you may not come into this time of trial. Jesus, we see you in the garden, praying in the darkness of night. Your anguished prayer is one of deep struggle with the Father's will. While you agonize over the Father's will and are strengthened to fulfill his plan, your disciples, overcome with sadness, can do nothing but give themselves over to sleep. As we begin this journey with you, Jesus, help us to see that for you, it was a journey of love. May we learn from this walk how to follow you more deeply and accept the love that you have for us. Oh Jesus, wake us from our sleep. Help us to face life's difficulties honestly, knowing that we can trust in God. Strengthen us in the time of our trials, that we may trust in you. May our prayer always be an expression of all that we are and all that we do. We love you, Jesus. Teach us to pray.
The second station, Jesus is betrayed and arrested. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of Mark. Immediately, while Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, and with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs, from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. So when he came, he went up to Jesus at once and said, Rabbi, and kissed him. Then they laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Jesus, as you wake your disciples, one who has not slept arrives with an angry crowd. Judas reveals your identity to them with a kiss. His act of affection is a signal to point you out as the one who loves but is rejected by his own. O Jesus, we are quick to greet you with affection in our prayer and worship, but how often do our external words and actions conceal hearts that are easily turned from you? We love you, Jesus. Help us to love you with all our hearts.
The third station. Jesus is condemned by the Sanhedrin. We praise you, Jesus, and we give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" They answered, "He deserves death." Jesus, your words are blasphemy to the ears of the high priest. He tears his garment, unable to see the presence of God in the one who stands before him, arrested and accused. He cannot believe in a God who, because of such great love, would willingly become so powerless. O Jesus, we can be so limited in our vision. We find it difficult to look beyond our narrow expectations and see you as you are. Give us the grace to hear your words clearly and to follow you in truth. We love you, Jesus. Reveal to us what God is like.
The fourth station. Peter denies knowing Jesus. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. And now listen to a reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came to him and said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before all of them, saying, "I do not know what you are talking about." When he went up to the porch, another servant girl saw him and said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again, he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then he began to curse and swore an oath, "I do not know the man." At that moment the cock crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. Jesus, you told Peter that he would deny you 3 times before the cock would crow. He did not believe you. He swore he would never deny you, and that in fact he was willing to die for you. Peter felt that he knew himself better than you knew him. But now as dawn approaches, the cock crows, he sees the truth. O Jesus, we set out to follow you, but then quickly turn, going our own way. We are afraid to acknowledge you in front of others, but you speak to us in the midst of our trial. We love you, Jesus. Keep us faithful to you.
The fifth station, Jesus is condemned by Pilate. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of Luke. Pilate then called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was perverting the people, and here I have examined him in your presence, and have not found this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he has sent him back to us. Indeed, he has done nothing to deserve death." But they kept urgently demanding with loud shouts that he be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate gave his verdict that their demand should be granted. Jesus, Pilate perceives your innocence, but the crowd insists on guilt. Hearing their persistent shouts, Pilate sets aside the judgment of his conscience, and the decision is made. He hands you over to be crucified. O Jesus, how often do we let the threatening voice of the crowd overwhelm the voice of conscience? Fill us with compassion for the outcasts and commitment to the truth. We love you, Jesus. Lead us beyond the crowd.
The sixth station. Jesus is scourged and crowned with thorns. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of Mark. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters. And they called together the whole cohort. And they clothed him in a purple cloak. And after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. Jesus, soldiers of an earthly realm mock your kingship. You were so powerless in their eyes, so weak, the ruler of a kingdom that cannot be seen, and therefore must not exist. They treat you as a foolish impostor caught in a lie. O Jesus, how often do we look for the kingdom with the eyes of the world rather than with eyes of faith? We forget your promise that your kingdom is among us. Help us to see your strength in our weakness, your reign in our powerlessness. We love you, Jesus. Establish your rule over us.
The seventh station. Jesus takes up his cross. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. Let us listen now to a reading from the Gospel of John. Then Pilate handed Jesus over to the Jews to be crucified. So they took Jesus, carrying the cross by himself. He went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. We invite you to kneel. Jesus, like Isaac carrying the wood to the mountain, you set out with the wood of the cross, but unlike him, you will not ask your Father where the lamb is, because you know you are the lamb of sacrifice. You now begin your journey with the cross. O Jesus, you carry a cross which is given unjustly. You willingly bear the burden of our sinfulness and accept the cross of our guilt. There is no greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. We love you, Jesus. Help us to show this love in our lives.
The eighth station. Simon Cyrene helps Jesus. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of Luke. As they led him away, they seized the man, Simon Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. Jesus, the torture you experienced at the hands of the soldiers left you weak. When you prayed in the garden that the will of the Father be done, an angel was sent to strengthen you. Now, as you seek to fulfill the Father's will, he sends Simon to help you. O Jesus, strengthen us on our journey. Open our hearts to the help you offer through the kindness of others. Open our eyes to the needs of those who walk beside us. We love you, Jesus. Lighten our burdens.
The ninth station. Jesus meets the weeping women. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of Luke. A great number of people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" Jesus, after being silent, you speak. You turn the eyes of the women away from your suffering and toward the destructive powers of sin. You warn them not to shed their tears for you, but rather for themselves and their children. If you, the innocent one, can suffer so, what will be the fate of the guilty? O Jesus, the wood is now very dry. Set fire to the world so that it might burn with your love. Destroy all hatred. Fill us with joy again. Teach us to mourn the way things are. Show us the way they could be. We love you, Jesus. Weep for us.
The 10th station. Jesus is crucified. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and your resurrection, you have set us free. Listen to a reading of the Gospel of Mark. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified Jesus with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing, and the people stood by watching. But the leaders scoffed at him and said, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Messiah of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over his head that said, This is the King of the Jews. Jesus, your suffering continues as nails are driven into your hands and feet and taunting jeers are hurled at your body, imprisoned on the cross. Yet to those who mock and challenge you, you offer no reproach, only forgiveness and compassion for them in their ignorance. Oh Jesus, how often we have acted as if the way of the cross was unnecessary and too difficult. We believe we know a better way, a way worn down by the crowd. We find that path goes nowhere. Forgive us. We do not know what we are doing. We love you. And Jesus, by your wounds, heal us.
The 11th station, Jesus promises paradise to the crucified thief. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of Luke. One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding Jesus, saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Jesus, two others are nailed on either side of you. One challenges you to release him now. The other asks to be freed with you in your kingdom. One sees only weakness, the other sees power and is able to trust in the promise of everlasting life with you as his time in this world comes to an end. O Jesus, look upon us now. See us in our need and hear us as we cry out to you. Help us to trust you in difficult circumstances. Give us eyes to see your power in hopeless times, to see your kingdom in all we encounter. We love you, Jesus. Remember us.
The 12th station. Jesus cares for his mother. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of John. Standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. Jesus, you give your mother to the disciple you love. Even as you face death, you entrust those whom you love most into each other's care. Your dying is marked by giving and by concern for the ones who remain. You do not leave us as orphans. You have promised your Spirit to the church, and at the cross, the church is born. O Jesus, help us to see that we are the disciples you love, and you have given Mary, your mother, to us too. We pray that we might allow the Spirit to give us life as sisters and brothers, joined in mutual care. We love you, Jesus. Bind us as one.
The 13th station. Jesus dies. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. Listen now to the Gospel of Luke. It was about noon, and darkness had come over the whole land until 3 p.m, while the sun's light failed and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying out in a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God and said, "Certainly, this man was innocent." Jesus, the word spoken by the Father, you now return to him, having accompanied the purpose to which you were sent. Your trust in the Father remains, even amid dark clouds of death. O Jesus, may we too accomplish the purpose for which we were created. Help us to commit ourselves into the Father's hands and trust in him and believe in his love for us, a love that your death reveals to us. May your dying never be in vain. We love you, Jesus. Help us to die to ourselves and live for you.
The 14th station, Jesus is buried. We praise you, Jesus, and give you thanks. By your cross and resurrection, you have set us free. A reading from the Gospel of Luke. Then Joseph of Arimathea took the body of Jesus down, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and laid it in a rock-hewn tomb where no one had ever been laid. It was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was beginning. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed, and they saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. On the Sabbath they rested according to the commandment. Jesus, now the time of surrender, of being at rest, begins. It is the 7th day when God rested from the work of creation, and you, the Son of God, rest and await the dawn of the 8th day, when all will be made new, and we wait with you. O Jesus, teach us to rest. Deliver us from thinking that everything depends upon our actions. Help us to be patient in trusting that God will bring about the completion of his creation through you. We love you, Jesus. Fill us with your peace.
Closing prayer. A reading from the Gospel of John. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." Jesus, with joy we view your victorious wounds. Help us to meditate on them and to see in them the sign of victory. May they give us courage to go forth with your blessing. O Jesus, bless us with your outstretched hands. Give us your peace. Give us your love. We love you, Jesus. Be with us as we go out to do the will of God in our lives. Amen.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Whoa, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord?